make us a sheath. Got my leather, got our pattern. I lay it on here. This is really simplistic right here. We're just gonna lay the pattern on the leather, trace around it. Just right around the outside edge, nothing special. Here we go. All right, we're gonna cut it out with a knife. Once again, nothing special here. Super simple. No tips for this, just cut it out. Roll that up for next time. Hi guys, I'm Aaron with Aleeknives. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time visiting and you want to learn more about knife making and cool tips and tricks for metalworking, you should start right now by hitting that subscribe button and then ring the bell notification so you're notified of all my future content. Okay, here we go. You can see I've just got a little bit extra to cut off up here just to kind of even things up. Boom. Now we fold that over, should give us a nice sheath, and that's what we're looking for. Okay. Now, if you have all the right tools, then you could use that V-gouge tool that I was talking about earlier, and you can run a V-gouge up through here, which thins out the back and makes it fold over a little easier. If you don't have one of those, that's fine. You don't have to have one. There's always a way around. You could just fold it over. Just give yourself some pats. I find that when you do that, it just adds some cool texturing. I use this mallet for all kinds of different tasks. You notice I'm hammering on this side because this is the front. So, not a big deal. Kind of try to just line up your edges, get the tip to line up right there. Perfect. Excellent. Don't worry about this not matching, and don't worry about this not matching. You just have to get it close. We'll grind all that off, or sand all that off, or trim it up with the razor knife later. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to make this welt piece here. So this welt, what this will do is when you slide the knife in, the blade edge will come right up against this piece of leather, say like this, and what that does is your stitching goes through here, and that way it protects the stitches from your nice cutting edge. You have to have the welt. If you don't put a welt in here, the first time you insert the knife, it'll come right in and cut your stitches right out, and you won't have a sheath very long. So anyhow, we're going to cut the welt. Here we go. This is the welt. It's just the only part that really matters is the inside. The outside we can trim to fit the sheath. We just have to make sure that we've got a little extra material on the welt so that it protrudes slightly, because if it doesn't stand proud of the front and back panel of the sheath, then you'll have to trim the sheath down to fit the welt. so first off, looks like we could just take just a tiny bit out of this area here. There we go, fits up real nice. Okay, so let's check this out. So we've got a line right here down the center of the sheath. That's the center. This is the center of the knife. You can see the handle's got a little bit of width on each side. So you lay the handle right on the center, and then you lay it over, kind of angled. That should give you the extra material that you need. Plus we're going to do a little wet forming, so it's not too big of a deal here. Alright, so there's that right there. So that's going to go just like that. Perfect. Okay. Phase 1 is complete. So now we're going to glue that in. We got to figure out a belt strap. Belt strap, we're going to go super easy. We're just going to cut a belt strap 1 inch wide. Nothing crazy here. Look at that. That's already got one straight edge. Let's make that just super easy. Now, I'm not too worried about this. I'm going to cut it a little bit long. There we go, right there. And then we'll just trim it down to size. Belt strap. Belt loop. That's the belt loop. Here's a cool thing that we can do. Alright, so if that's going to sit on your belt like that, how about let's contour the belt loop to kind of fit the top of the sheath. So we'll even it up. We want this to run parallel with the sheath. Let's see, there we go. How about something like that right in the middle? Let's just draw this right here, because that's going to be the top contour. And we'll just cut that off. You don't have to do that. You can have the belt loop be square if you want to, but I think it'll look cool with the belt loop kind of, you know, following that same contour slightly. So we're going to run a stitch pattern right there, and then we're going to come down. Let's see, let's go 2 inches. Say a belt is 2 inches. So we'll go 2.5 inches to give us a little bit of room on the bottom for stitching. Boom. One cool thing to note, this is 90 degrees, so we've got a nice straight line right there, and we've got a mark right there, so it's straight here, which means we're cutting at 90, which is exactly what we want. There we go. Done and done. Done and done. Now, I'm going to show you how to get around using some of the tools that I use. Normally, what I would do is I would take this stitch groover and I would run a groove here and I would run a groove here for the stitches to lay into, and then I would use this little stitching wheel to run back and forth to space out my stitching. I'm going to show you a way to do it without those. For this guy right here, you could use one of these. You could use one of these. You could use one of these. This would probably be the best thing to use here, but calipers would work just fine. So all you're going to do is same deal here. What this would do is mark a distance right there. And this is just to give you a line. that's about the right distance right there. I'm not going to do it on this because I'm going to use my tools, because I know who's going to take this sheath and they're going to want me to do it right and have the stitches lay beneath the surface. But you don't have to. You could do it this way. So you just take your wing divider and you mark yourself a line, just like that. That actually worked out pretty well. So I'm going to show you the difference. See how I actually removed material right there? And that's going to allow my stitching to lay slightly beneath the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and do this top and bottom. Okay. Now, where I would use this stitching wheel right here to lay out my stitching, just like this, so you can see what to show you. You see how that gave me a little position for each stitch? That's one way you could do it. Or I'll show you an alternative method without using this. You could use this again. So just find what would be good and you just walk it. So let's say we start here, stick it in, turn it around, stick it in, turn it around. And each time that you spin it, it's evenly spacing and poking a new hole. And that's a good way that you could space out stitching. It's obviously a little more time consuming, maybe a little more difficult. You can even pick it up and just rock it back and forth like this. You know, that's another way you could do it. But you see, it's not perfectly even. If you took your time, you could get that right and it could work. It's just, you know, I'm just showing you, you don't have to buy these tools right off the bat. However, I would. You know, I mean, this is 10 bucks. $12, you know, spend 10, 20, 30 bucks. I guarantee you if you make one, you're gonna make more than one. So, okay, we need to get this stitched on to the back side right there. So what I'm gonna do is, I like to glue it on first. So I'm gonna give myself a mark here. And I'm gonna give myself a mark up underneath here. And that's gonna tell me how far I can run my glue. What you don't want is you don't want your glue to run above that mark, because the glue resists a stain or the color. And you'll see a white spot where it didn't take any color, and you don't want that. So I'm only gonna run the glue on the inside of that and on the inside of this. That way when I stick this down, you don't see the glue. One thing, before I stick this, I'm gonna go ahead and trim the corners. Just kind of a nice neat touch that I do. And you don't have one of these tools yet, possibly you do. This is an edge beveler. This is a tool that I'm gonna use. You don't have to do this. Your leather would just be square if you don't use this. But I'm going to go ahead and clean up my leather edges, round them out so that it makes it easier for you to get your belt loop through it. The whole meal deal. Let's just go ahead and bevel all those edges. This is a number 2. And like I said, I could do away with the number 2 and go even smaller actually. There we go. Alright, so all those edges are beveled. One more thing, I need to put another line across here for a row of stitches. If you leave it just like this, and you stitch it there and there, when you hang it on your belt, it will cant, and it'll ride on your belt crooked. You need a stitch line across there so it will ride right across the stitch line. Right here, to cut a groove, this right here, this is a same exact cutting tool as this. It's just not mounted on a shaft. It's mounted as a tool so that you can gouge out some of that leather material. Right, just like that. Nothing special. And then I can space out my stitching. Ta-da! Let me grab some glue. We want that to stay in the cap. Wipe off a little bit of the excess glue. We're only going to want the glue on the top piece of this. This is a barge cement. It's a type of cement that you don't want to get it on your front faces of the leather, that's for sure. It's a contact cement, so you paint both surfaces, let it tack up, and then you stick them together, and they're there. They stick really, really, really well. So just like I said, we're going to paint the bottom side of this. And just the bottom side. That's it. And the top of this one. Just enough to hold it until we get our stitching in. That's good enough there. Let that dry, and then I'll stick it together. We're ready. Okay, so you want to make sure that you cover your glue. Stick it down, cover that glue up. Good job. All right, stick it good. Now, you can use a stitching awl, which is like a ball with a needle on it. You can poke through that. Or you can use a drill. You can use a drill press, anything that you want to use. I personally use a drill press. I'm going to take you over there and we're going to drill these holes real quick. I just picked the drill bit. I don't know. It looks about the right size. Good enough for me. I am going to use the artificial sinew. It's a little thicker, but this highly depends on whatever you're using for a needle and what you're using for a thread. Since I'm using the sinew, I'm going to use something just a little bit bigger. I like to run a piece of board on the back, and it's just a matter of hitting your hole and drilling through. Pretty simple. Certainly not rocket science here. That's that. Alrighty. So we've got that done. I take my stitching wheel and just run it back over again. That kind of just takes your extra material that pops up when you drill it and tucks it back down. Once again, you probably don't have those tools. You don't need all those tools. Not a big deal. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to glue in this welt. That's the next order of business. Actually, before we do that, we're going to stitch this up. This is just a simple saddle stitch. We pass through from one side to the other, one side to the other. So when you first pass it through, you want to shore up your pieces so they're the same, equidistance. So that's one side, and we're going to chase it right through with the other one. Cool thing about doing a short distance like that is you could just stitch it up and then pull on it and it tightens up. If you got a longer distance, you kind of want to tighten each thread as you go. All right, so now these guys right here. What you see? Can you see? Yes, yes, you can see. Awesome. Okay, so I wanted to show you. All right, there we go. Right about there. That's how far you want to cut those. I'll show you why. All right. Yes, you can see those two tips. Synthetics are awesome. See, if you just melt them down like that and then smush them. Boom, it won't pull out now. It's in there. And they're nice and flat. They're not gonna mar your blade or your finish or anything like that. You don't have to worry about it. All right, let's stitch up the bottom. This is just a 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 stitches. Fold it over, repeat. Ooh, that went fast. Alrighty. If you guys are interested in seeing me do some more complicated sheaths, I would definitely do that. I wasn't planning on doing it in this video, obviously, because I wanted to do something more along the beginner speed. Now, I'm going to bring you up super close and show you how I'm threading this when we actually stitch the sheath together. It's going to be the same exact way that I do the main stitching, how I'm doing this little belt loop. So don't worry, I am going to bring the camera up close so you can see exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Ugh. I'm just kind of hurrying through this part. There we go, there we go. Set the needles off to the side, nice and tight, trim off my pieces, and burn them. Smush them, move on. Okay, now, we're gonna glue it. So, I've already marked my line right there for my welt. My welt will fit right up on that line right there. Just gonna run some glue, nothing special. A liberal amount of glue here. And just don't glue on the inside of the line because it does stay tacky and it will leave some tacky stuff on your blade. You don't want that. No, you don't. Okay, that's done. Confirm which side I'm going to glue, which is going to be this side. And try not to get said glue on hand. There we go. Let that dry. Once this dries, I'll stick it together. Then I'll glue this side and the other side of the welt. We'll stick it together. We will shore it up, cut it to size, lay out our lines for our stitching and do the main stitching and any embellishments that we might want to do on the sheath. And this particular knife is already spoken for. While I was doing this build tutorial, I had a good friend say, hey, I would like that knife. So I'm going to do something special for him. And you'll see that too. Okay. Here we go. Stick my piece in there. Excellent. Just give me a mark about where to stick my glue on this other side. Just take the same welt piece. Not a big deal. Now, like I said, I got a lot of extra material here to work with, so I'll be able to cut some of that off to, you know, the sheath doesn't need to be much bigger than the knife. You don't want a big bulky sheath. I like to have about a 1/4 inch of material between the blade and the edge of the sheath. 1/4 inch is plenty. You know, on my bushcraft sheaths, my foldovers and stuff, sometimes I go extra because those actually look nice with a little extra meat. So I'll let that tack up, and then I'll stick it together. Excellent. I can tell you right there, I made a mistake here by running the welt all the way into the corner. I'm gonna have to cut a little tiny piece of that leather out to give it some clearance to squish closed. Not a huge deal, just something that I noticed. There we go. Cut it out. All right, here we are. We're back. We're gonna go ahead and fold this over and stick it. Hey, that worked out real nice. That just makes it stick real nice and tight. You can trim this up a lot of different ways. I just take my razor blade. This is just to get the two sides close before I walk over and finish it up on the sander. That's pretty good. All right, check it out. Now I'm gonna walk over to my 2x72 sander and I'm gonna clean up these edges. Most leather makers don't have a 2x72 sander to walk over to, so they do it in other ways. You know, you could do it with just cleaning it up with something like this and then burnishing it, but I like my method. Okay, so I threw a coarse grit belt on here, power it up, and all I'm going to do is clean up these edges, just to true everything up. Good. Perfect. That's it. Back to the bench. We're back to the bench. Here's our sheath right here. And what we just did is we trued up these edges. We did that now before I run my stitching line, because if I ran my stitching line and then I went over to true up my edges, I run the risk of grinding or sanding into my stitches. I don't want that. So here we go. Now I'm just going to run a simple stitch groove right up the side, stop at the top. I'm going to do this twice here, just so it's nice and deep. There we go. Good deal. I'm going to take my stitching wheel. Look at that. We'll walk over to the drill press, pop some holes, and stitch this thing. Alright, now here's a good tip for you. If you just put this on a block of wood and go and start stitching, what happens is this will tip. It'll tilt because you have a belt loop. And your stitching, if this tilts, it'll be square on the front, but your hole will drift over towards the edge on the back. So, this piece of wood that I use, I run the sheath right up to the edge so that the belt loop is off of the wood. That way I can get a nice square edge and have my holes drill straight. Let's go. It's all about some straight holes. You know what? I'm going to raise this table up just a little bit. No reason for me to be working that hard. There we go. Okay, so here we are. See how I'm holding the leather down with my fingers? I'm holding the level to be square with the wood, or I'm holding the leather to be square with the wood so that my holes drill through straight and accurate. And I'll have a nice straight stitch line on the back side. It took me a while to figure this one out. My stitches would be perfect on the front, but every now and then on the back my stitch line would drift. And it was this right here that fixed it. Just keeping it nice and flat. Every now and then I blow the leather pieces out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. Perfect. Alright, let's walk over and get this thing stitched up. Alright, so here's what we're left with after running those. You can see, I wanted to show you, see how it's kind of raised? Each one of these little holes is raised up from the drilling process. So I'm going to take the stitching wheel again, and I use this to kind of tuck it back down. Just tucking everything back in, showing it where it goes. Alright, and then I flip it over and I do it the exact same thing on the other side. Kind of refine your stitch line, just like that. Now we're ready to go. We're ready to stitch that thing up. So I'm going to get my stitching ready, get my thread ready. Here's a tip for you. When you're going to do a sheath like this, when I first started doing this, I would struggle with how much thread do I need. Here's a good rule of thumb. A standard sheath with one single piece of leather for a welt, so you've got a 3-ply thickness of a good 8 or 10 ounce leather, is generally 6 times the length So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's how much you need to stitch this bad boy up. And a lot of times I'll just measure out 7 just to be on the safe side. Alright, so here's a good tip for you. Hold your 2 needles and get your material laid out. You want your tips to be the same length, right like that. And this to be nice and straight. Alright, here's how I do this. I get myself in a chair like this and I pinch it between my knees. That way I can use both hands on my stitch. I come through the very top stitch, I shore it up so it's even, so I have my 2 pieces even. And I'm going to go through my next hole with both needles. There's the first needle, and then I go through with the other needle in the opposite direction, and I tighten it up, okay? And then I just move forward, do that same progression, same hole. Okay, so just pull it through, tighten it. Each time I'm passing through the same hole in both directions. Okay, so you've seen how I do it like this. Now I'm going to bring you in close so you can actually watch the needles going through the holes, just in case you have any more questions. Alright, got my needles, so through the hole, and then from the other side through the same hole, and then tighten it. Next hole, and so on. Once you get going, this doesn't take too long. You can actually kind of be passing through. I generally do this while I'm watching TV, which doesn't happen very often, but I do it. There we go. It's definitely a good practice to pull them tight every time you pass through. You can see, I want you to see the top is nice and tight, and the part that I haven't done, see how it flares out? So it does tighten this up as you move down it, as you stitch it up. And you want your stitching to be nice and tight. It looks good. You don't want to go too tight. If you go too tight, then your stitches can kind of pull into the leather. This is vegetable tan leather, so it's going to require us dyeing it and putting some sort of sealer over the top of it. Or you could just dye it and wax it. You don't have to dye it, you could just leave it natural and wax it. There's a lot of different things you can do. I've even heard of some people using bear oil, you know, where they render bear fat down and use that. But, all right, ooh, that's a good shot right there. There we go. What do you think of that shot? Of course, people who do this all day have something called a stitching horse, which basically does what my knees are doing here. But, you know, I've done this for 6 years and I still haven't bought one. By the time I actually break down and buy a stitching horse, I'll probably have a sewing machine. So, how about I just not buy one? My knees work just fine. And hey, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about getting stuff done on a budget. You know, not buying every tool under the sun. Obviously, a stitching horse was not on my priority list. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Now I plan on passing these through and burning the tips off, so I don't want to see those on the front. So when I get down to the end, I'll kind of double back so that both of my ends are on the back side of the sheath, so that that's where they are burned off at. There we go. Alright, so I'm gonna come back through here and out here. And this one will come back through here. Pull them tight and trim them off. Take off the nastiness. There we go. So, and that'll just disappear. Okay, we're ready to clean up the edges, and then we'll move on to getting this thing dyed and wet form the knife in it. Okay, this is a neat angle to show you how this bevels the edges. So I'm just gonna go through here and run this edge beveler. Sorry guys. There we go. Let's go ahead and cut this tip off here. Okay, so that's all cleaned up. I do want to bevel the inside of this here. Okay, it's looking really nice. Let's cut this tip off too. There we go. Okay, that is nice. Let's get it dyed. What I've chosen is a Java brown. Java brown. Oh, that's gonna be a good color. Get it on quick, especially on that front panel. Just get it on there. the Super Sheen. This is a leather sealant that I use. After you dye, you cover it with Super Sheen, and it just kind of seals everything up, and it protects any embellishments or any tooling that you've done, which we didn't do any tooling on this sheath. I put this stuff on fairly liberally also. Plus, I find that this kind of moistens the leather just perfect to get it to the point where you can fit that knife in. But this locks in your dye so that your dye doesn't want to come off. It won't rub off on your clothes or anything like that. Okay, let's go ahead and insert the knife. Get it all the way down in there. There we go. And then we're going to press around the knife sheath right there. Don't use your fingernails. Use your thumbs and really get that knife shape to pop out. I find that what I do is I try to keep the back flat where it's going to ride on your belt, and really make it pop out of the front of the sheath so that you can see the knife shape out the front of the sheath. I think that looks pretty cool when you do it that way. All right, see how I formed it here right around the handle, and I formed it right here real well, and I'll squish it down there and then pull the knife. Now it'll be tight the first time. Wipe your knife off because there's some moisture in there. Not a lot, but there is some moisture in there. Okay. That is almost done. So see how the knife, I formed it to where this is flat and the shape of the knife fit on one side of the sheath. That's going to make it fit on your belt a little bit better. The next thing we're going to do is slick down the edges. I use this little burnishing tool. A lot of guys just use a little piece of a deer antler, or shoot, you could use a screwdriver. It doesn't matter. You could use a handle on a screwdriver. Just something that you can run back and forth to create some friction and some heat, and you seal up the edges of the leather. That way if it gets introduced to moisture, it doesn't suck into the leather at the edge where it was cut. See, that didn't take much work at all. It actually burnishes really easily if you let that Super Sheen set up for just a minute and then you burnish it. If you try to do it right away, you'll work at this a lot more. So just let that Super Sheen set up for a second and then burnish it up. You'll be ready to go. Slick, 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 slick. See, that's nice and clean and burnished. Get up here. You definitely want to do these edges that you touch all the time. Right now they're kind of rough, and if you let it dry, those edges will be kind of rough, so you just run this burnishing tool around it. Lays the leather down and sorts it out for you. The other thing that I want to do is create kind of a funnel up here, where I'm just going to tease the leather out and create kind of a funnel. See how I funneled that out? I funneled it out on all the edges, and that'll just make it a little easier to stick your knife in. There we go. That is a job well done. Knife sheath. Nice, simple, elegant lines. Perfect. We've now made the sheath for our knife, and it fits. It's got a great home to live in. It's a wonderful package, nice and tight. I like the colors. Everything worked out super great. Now that we have a home for the knife to live in, we can go ahead and sharpen this thing. So in the next video, I'm gonna go over different sharpening angles, the different edges you can put on a knife. I'm gonna give you some foolproof ways to sharpen a knife and resharpen a knife, and talk to you all about sharpening, and I'm gonna do a cut test too. So hopefully you guys stick around. See you guys there.